Colleen, take it away, and thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you so much for that super intro, and I'm so excited to see everybody online. It's amazing to me how much happier I get when I see everybody's faces. So for those of you who are sharing your video, thank you. All of you have great hair and super smiles and look fabulous. And for those of you who are hiding without your video share, I do forgive you. It's totally okay. But my daughter did mention to me, she's a teenager, so she has like no filter when she talks about stuff. She told me that my hair had an ombre look today. So just thank you for putting up with the I haven't had my hair done in 6 months motif that I'm going with. So that's just how that's feeling in my heart right now that I'm sharing that with all of you. But what we're actually going to be talking about besides my own hair issues is a part of training that is really close and near and dear to my heart. And if I can remember how to share my screen, you're going to see the fabulous slides that go with it. Yay, I love when things actually work. So there's me with better hair, just in case you're wondering how that used to look back in the olden days when I got to go places. So the nuts and bolts of managing a committee. So I love to talk about this at the committee level because so much of the work that we do in junior leagues and in other nonprofit organizations happens at the committee level. But I do think that this can apply to board level conversation at all. Anytime you're managing a group of any kind, I think all of this can really be applicable. And we're going to talk about 4 basic areas of this tonight. And as I'm going through it, please feel free to throw questions into the chat. In fact, if you want to put one in there now so I can remember where it is, that's even more super. And, you know, if I'm asking questions and you want to raise hands and stuff, although I feel like there was something that you all wanted to do a poll about before I got going, and now I can't remember if I jumped in too quickly, if there was something that you all wanted to share. But if you want to do that at the end, that's totally fine too. So this is going to be the 4 things we hit. We're going to talk about the roles that people play in groups. We're going to talk about engagement and delegation. We're going to talk about appreciation and the emotional paycheck, which is really the only thing that volunteers are sort of getting out of their volunteer gig. And then at the very end, there's like a nuts and bolts tip sheet that I've always found super helpful. So those are the basics. Please feel free to chime in as we go. I love doing presentations like where I can see people and I can get the energy of a room. So this is a little bit better than the podcast that Laura and I just did together. Laura Magadoff, my cohort in crime, who promised to back me up if any of my tech goes south. She and I were joking about how we were doing a podcast and just talking to an imaginary audience, and neither of us liked it. We much prefer when we can actually see lots and lots of people. So before we get into how you're going to manage your committee and the people that you're working with, I think it's really important to figure out where you are, right? Like if you're coming into your experience with the coming year and your coming tasks, and you're not really sure why you said yes to doing it, you're going to be coming at this from a different place than someone who is like jazzed up and so excited and thinking this is going to be the best experience of their entire life. So I like to think of this as sort of like a spectrum of where you are for your own enthusiasm. And then I think the other part about this that's important is really remembering that you want to be able to have communication with your team right from the get-go. And like, if you want to be a total dork like I am, like I embrace my dorkhood when it comes to all things training. And I would, if I were going to be starting a committee right now, I'd be like, listen, there's a whole ton of stuff that's going on in the world. Where are you for this part of it? Like, where are you feeling like this is going to be something that's important to you? Are you like, listen, I'm doing this because someone asked me to, and they had like no other prospects, and I was the last person with a heartbeat that said yes to this project and yes to this leadership position? Or were you gunning from the get-go and saying, I really wanted to do this? And then knowing that as your year goes on, as the month goes on, as your day is evolving, you're going to be coming back and forth. Like, you might start out as a 1, you might grow to a 5, you might start as a 5 and come back as a 3. You might forget what the numbers mean and don't know any of the parts of this that are going to connect. But just being aware that that is going to sort of set the tone for a lot of it is really important. And when you tune in next week for the second part of this, we'll talk a lot about what that feedback is, and knowing this part of enthusiasm is really important, in knowing how to give that feedback so you know how people are going to receive it. So managing a committee can look different as far as the tasks are involved, depending on where you're going to be doing your specific work. But the way that you deal with people and the way that you manage the committee can really apply to anything. So whether you're doing communication or finance, like all of these things are going to be able to apply across the board. So what does that look like? I love Venn diagrams, but this one I feel like just fell short a little bit. So in reality, this Venn diagram would have a lovely little shaded area where these two pieces come together. When you're working with people, you've got so many different things that you need to accomplish as far as goals and tasks and effort, but there's so much more involved with the personalities of people. And I think that if we forget about that part of it and forget that when you're managing humans, the humans are messy and there's a lot that can go on beyond that, it's really important to realize that sometimes when you take those two things together, you're only getting a really small sliver of productivity, which might be really frustrating if you're someone who can be really focused on purpose and tasks. And then lots of other people might be thinking more about other things. So making sure that you keep that in mind can save everyone a lot of heartache too. All right, so here's where we get into my little bit of obsession about pop psychology. If you're also a pop psychology dork, you can like raise your hand and we can hang out later and talk about this. So some of these things are things that have fascinated me personally throughout the years, right? And I think that we as humans have been trying to figure this out. When I talk about doing things in my writing and I talk about character development, like we're always trying to figure out like, why is someone doing something? What's their motivation? What are their goals? What is it that they want to get out of this? And what's standing in their way, right? That's what any good story is. And that's how humans sort of operate. So if you read Canterbury Tales back in high school and you remember like they were talking about like the different humors that made people like either really melancholy or full of sanguine, like all of these things are like where people started to just talk about why people are the way they are. And then, different cultures and parts of the world have different ways that they explain what part of you might be either, locked up in your chi or something is not moving the way that it's supposed to. Then you can get like super cosmic about it with like the elements and stuff. I'm definitely an air person, but I can also go towards water because I'm a Cancer sign. So like those are the things that are like part of those elements. And then you can get into some of the more like actual tangible things. But honestly, I feel like if you were to combine my Myers-Briggs INFJ and also recognizing the way that that communicates with my air and water sign, like you'd be like, oh yeah, that's actually a lot of similarities in that astrology part of it. And then Tara and I have talked about some of the other things that we've used beyond, because I know that Tara has also been a bit of a dork and taken quite a few of these quizzes as well. And you can do things that are part of insights. There's DISC. And then if you're a true nerd like I am, you're also going to want to take every BuzzFeed quiz that exists so that like there's also a great one that's about like what kind of circus performer would you be? And I got ringmaster, which of course I think is brilliant. And I thought that was such a funny little side. And then like if things are really not going well, like we'll talk more about that next time when like you think you've set up your year for total success, but things have gone south, like you're going to want to pull out that DSM diagnosis code and figure out like, okay, what exactly is wrong with this person that they are not being a helpful part of this committee. So having a little sense of that pop psychology can make all of this a little bit more understanding. I think making sure that we can, consult the emotions that are involved in all of it, I think is really helpful. My be all end all favorite about groups though is gotta be Berkman. And I know that Junior League of Summit has done a lot of work with Berkman this year, which makes me super happy because I think when you give everybody this sort of knowledge, then you're all having the same tools to talk about, right? So like it might not be, what kind of pasta are you, but you can be like, oh, you're acting super red and you know that means someone's getting something done. Or if you're someone who is going to be like super stressed out, which is where I go when I'm super stressed. It's blue. So I'm hiding under my covers, and you're not going to find me. You're going to think I've ghosted and evaporated, and you're going to be like really concerned about what the actual work is. But if you come find me and talk to me and hang out underneath my covers with me, then you'll be able to figure out like, okay, well, how are we going to work through this? So, and Berkman, I think, has got a really great outlook on this, because it also helps you figure out how you deal with everybody else in their different quadrants. So if you haven't done this work yet, I highly recommend it. And AJLI actually has a phenomenal deal with Berkman where you can get your members tested and do this quiz and really make it work. So, sorry, I'm just noticing there's some stuff in the chat. So I'm just going to put this to the side now that I see it's there. In case anyone's got questions, please feel free to interrupt me at any point. No problem. All right, so what comes next? Oh, this is another bit about that I think is super helpful for, especially, I mean, this I think applies to actual paid positions as well, you know, places where you actually get money for what you're doing versus volunteer work where you're having a different kind of response and motivation for it. And Ann Porteous from Stanford University does a lot of work on team dynamics and team building and leadership development. And because I've always been a dork, when I was in high school, I was at this communication conference where we did a lot of work talking about task-oriented people and maintenance-oriented people. And task people basically want to get things done, and they want to accomplish the goal, and they want to make it work. Maintenance people want to make sure everybody's feeling warm and fuzzy about it as you go through it. I don't know if it was just because they were trying to work with an age-appropriate audience that we didn't go into hindering back in the 19 somethings, or if like maybe people are just meaner now, that this is part of what we need to talk about more in this day and age. And we will absolutely talk more about hindering personalities. I actually have an entire workshop that I have presented for other nonprofit organizations about poisonous people and how that affects the entire organization when you've got one or two people that are really hindering progress and people. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get into delegating later. But if you really get into the muck on that, please, on any of these questions, you can reach out to me at any time, because I think that there's a lot that can really make for a difficult situation, and there's ways to handle things that make it more positive for everybody. And I think most of the time we can float between these roles, but I do think that as your personality, you probably have one that you gravitate more towards. And that is like totally okay. Like some people I think that like one might be better than the other, but the true situation is that you need to have both. You can't have just one in a group and make things work. So there's actually something to be kind of like aware of. If you recognize that everybody's super chatty and having a great time, but they're not getting the work done, then that might be the dynamic of your team that you need to work on. So some of this is sort of self-evident, right? Like if something is going well, you want to make sure you've got all of the stats for it, but you also want to make sure that you're sharing that appreciation. And we'll talk more about that appreciation later also. But it's also important to recognize that if you are the leader of a team, to remember that your response is going to set the tone for everyone in your group. There was many years ago in an organization I was working with where one of our team members had been diagnosed with cancer. And the news of this diagnosis was being shared with our group. And the woman who was running the group said, "Oh no, how are we going to get things done now?" And that was not the response for her to have in public. It might have been something for her to have had behind the scenes. But when you're the person who is leading the team, you need to make sure that you're taking care of both of those things. She wasn't wrong. She's absolutely correct that someone was going to need to pick up that slack, but it wasn't the first thing that needed to be said. The first thing that needed to be said was about this person as a human. And then the work later happens. Especially with a volunteer organization, this needs to be something that people are really cognizant of. So that is the beginning of sort of that, rather, this is the end of the first section where we talk about the roles people play in groups. We're going to get a little bit now into that second part about engagement and delegation. So before I jump into that, I feel like I was just talking like a million miles a minute because I'm very cognizant of my timing and wanting to make sure that I'm wrapped up by in time for us to have some breakout time. Does anyone have any questions about any of that stuff that I just said? If you want to throw something in the chat or unmute yourself and chime in, that's totally okay. I'm glad that everything is perfectly clear. That always makes me super happy. All right, so one of the things that some of this information that's coming up about engagement versus satisfaction is more tailored language-wise about employees, because a lot of this information comes from Harvard Business School review, which I know, again, makes me a super dork that like I read this sort of like white paper stuff from business schools like on the side, but I'm just going to embrace that dorkiness and tell you a little bit about it. And it applies, I think, even more so with volunteer work. I think that making sure that people are getting engaged versus just feeling satisfied and content is really important, because it helps people not only with doing more and being more productive, but also with retaining members. And if you think about this from the Junior League perspective, like our mission is to be a member-based organization. Our mission is to develop the potential of women so that they can be effective, action-minded people in the community. So if you think about what that means, it doesn't mean that the work we are doing or the projects we are doing are the most important thing. It means that the members are the most important thing. And when we think about that and use that as our goal for how we are going to engage our members, develop our members, train our members, then we have a very different outcome about what that productivity is going to look like. So some of this seems pretty easy to do. Some of it might be a little bit harder. If we look at this next page, I think some of what I want to make sure we're talking about is that retention level. So, and this is not a webinar that's going to talk about membership, so to speak, but I think that it's impossible to talk about how we operate as committees and as members together if we don't talk about that outcome too. So most member-based organizations in our country are actually on a decline for membership, and Junior League reflects that trend also. So we need to think very purposefully about what it is that we are bringing as a value add for our members. What is it that they are getting as a takeaway? And making sure that we are recognizing that we need to invest in our members and to truly work on developing them and where they are. We'll have a better outcome as far as our membership retention, but it also is a better outcome for our productivity. And it helps people be more invested in what they're doing when we take that time to tell them why it is that they matter, why their development is important to us. And if we as the chair of that committee or the president of that board can't provide the training information that that person needs, then it's our job to help figure out where we can find it. You don't need to know everything as the chair of a committee. You just need to know how you can figure it out. And I think that that's one of the things that's really amazing about junior leagues in general, is that we've got such amazing resources. We've got this membership with JLS across the country and all of the webinars that are online. There are resources and people that we can actually talk to when we have a difficult moment. And then in New Jersey, we also have the Junior Leagues of New Jersey State Council, which is a consortium of all of the 8 leagues where we work together to provide other training opportunities with Get On Board. We work together with state advocacy, having a centralized message around communication and all of that. So there's a lot more behind just whatever small committee you might have in your local league. All right, so here's where I'm going to hope that all of you are going to take just a minute to jump on the chat. So if you've also been like dual purposing and like, you know, fixing dinner for your humans in your house or your furry people, my dogs have been pawing at the door trying to come in during the webinar, and they are really not happy with me that they are not being invited in. What is it that you why are you here? Why are you a leader? Why are you staying? What is it that has made you be part of the Junior League? So my first question, if anyone would kindly dump something into the chat or just go ahead and take yourself off mute. Why did you, well, it's two questions. We'll just do it at the same time. The first part is, why did you join? And the second part is, why did you stay? Those are the two questions. So while I'm waiting for anyone to join in on the chat, I'll tell you that most of the time, these are really similar. And we tend to come into just a few different categories. And the ones I'm seeing so far, thank you for those of you who are joining in the chat part of this. I'll share a few of the ones that are up here because I don't know if the recorded version of this actually records the chat too. To meet strong, like-minded women. I joined because I needed help with my own nonprofit. I wanted to find ways to volunteer in the community and meet new people. Passionate about serving my community. Joined to meet people. Stay because of the members. So a lot of these are very similar to other things that I have heard from other Junior League members across the country when I've done some of my work with both State Council in New Jersey and the Small Leagues Big Impact, which is the affinity group for leagues across the country. So these are some of the things that you all just said. I joined because I wanted to contribute positive change in the community, pursue interests outside of home and work, wanted to meet new people. I stayed because I made a positive impact on the community. I had personal development and skills, and I built social connections and friendships. So if we think about those reasons of why people joined and why people stay, and then we develop our committee work around those goals to reinforce why people wanted to be part of the Junior League, we will be setting everyone up for a more positive experience. So if we focus that as what our main goals are to make sure that we are engaging our members rather than only thinking of being a committee chair and the work that needs to be done and the list of things that need to be taken care of, and look at it in this perspective, I think it's going to be a much more positive outcome for all of us. So this is the other little bit, and again, thank you to everybody who joined in the chat. I hope that that gets recorded as well as part of this webinar, because I think that those are all great examples. So I think that when we talk about how people are engaged and we talk about how people are feeling like they are contributing, I think that it's important to recognize that some of this doesn't always relate to every single person. The different people who are members in the Junior League are going to have different things that are appealing to them. So when I was asked by friends of mine, don't you want to join the Junior League? I did not know very much about the Junior League. I had no idea what it was. And when people talked about wanting to join the Junior League, what they were talking about was the projects. And it was hard for me to wrap my head around why I was going to spend $180 for a membership to do volunteer work when I was going to be doing volunteer work. And there were plenty of other places where I could go volunteer and not have to spend money in order to do so. So I think it's really important when we talk about what Junior League actually is, and when we talk about what our options are with our committee, that we remember that it's more than just projects, that we also do advocacy work, and that we also do awareness and education. And then I always use this little triangle of impact that Janine Lesor put together from AJLI with the little dollar signs in the middle to remember that all of these things take money. And my background many years ago, was it all about fundraising and development. I worked for public television, and so we did everything from, call now and get your tote bag to gala dinners that would raise $3 million in an evening. So remembering that all of the stuff that we're talking about has that element of finance and fundraising, which can be, again, for some people really difficult to talk about. There's another workshop that I do that's called Fundraising and Other F Words, because I know that people have a really hard time being comfortable around that. But it's, I think, all part of this picture that's important to recognize how all of these different committees are going to interplay with each other. So if you're on a committee that's doing one of these elements and you've got someone that's not feeling it, but it's not working for them, I think it's important to recognize, again, as a member-based organization, it's not about getting the work done. It's about developing the member. And we need to figure out whether or not this is something that they need training in, or it's something that they need to be reassigned. We talk a lot about this in our delegation section, which is where we are going to be spending a few minutes talking on now. I'm just glancing down at my time to make sure I've got this. So delegation either has people feeling one of two ways. You're either like super excited and singing like Elsa, like, let it go, this is awesome, I'm so glad to get this off of my plate. Or the other half, where you are just completely freaking out and have a little bit of a control issue. And just so I can be in full disclosure, I'm the emoji freaking out. Like, I have definite control issues when I work on delegating, and this has been, as a member of a training organization, something that I have been working on personally, because I know that this can be something really difficult for a lot of people. So there's this fabulous grid that we'll get to in a minute, but before we do that, there's plenty of reasons why we don't delegate. And we're going to look at this in terms, again, about engagement. And since we're a membership organization, engaging our members are like the forefront of everything that we're going to be doing. So it's really easy to talk about the reasons that we don't delegate. I probably should have invited you all to jump in the chat and talk about ways that you don't, why you might not want to delegate your own self. If you want to add that in, please feel free. But again, these are some of the things that people tend to say. And these are not easy. Like, we talk about like trust issues. We talk about like, it's just taking so much more time to delegate something when I need to explain everything to someone. But again, as a training organization, that's our job. And when you take a leadership position, you are agreeing that you are going to work on making sure that your members are engaged. And I think it's also super important to talk about how we might think we're hoping to delegate, but the way that we talk about that and the words that we choose don't always match up. So I always say that the wishing section is like sort of the passive aggressive way that I talk to my family when I'm hoping someone is going to help me with chores around the house. Like, this is definitely the way that I talk to my teenagers, like walking around being like, really great if someone could empty the dishwasher, someone besides me. It's not actually delegating. It's me just being like a little bit of a whiny, non-direct person, which again, my kids think is just super fabulous. They get so excited about that. But delegating has very specific language around it. It's got a deadline, it's got a specified task, and it has a set of goals and expectations. And then it's also waiting to see if someone is actually going to say yes or no to that, because not everybody always has the time to do it. Not everybody always has the skills to do it. And that's part of what we need to recognize when we're working with people. Again, humans who are super messy and not at all easygoing. Well, some people are easygoing, but sometimes not so much. So this little delegation grid has been something that I have found very helpful when I have been working with people in a group and trying to figure out whether or not it's going to be successful when you delegate something. So if you sort of, cross over with the yes or the no, and whether or not you trust someone's skills and their motivation, it gives you sort of the answer on how you can delegate. So if you do trust their skills, if you do trust their motivation and they're passionate about something, then fully delegate it. Let it go, Elsa style, and wait until that deadline to come back. And it's going to be the easiest part of managing your committee. However, now we get to the other little parts where there's more nuances. If you have someone that's super excited and super passionate about it, but does not actually have the skills to get that task done, then that's where you need to spend some time on training. And that's where, as the chair, again, you don't need to know every single thing that needs to be done, but you need to figure out how to direct someone to find the skills they need. So this is where AJLI and the webinars become super helpful. There's some great stuff on TED Talks and YouTube, and like this is where that sharing of information and asking other people, hey, do you know where someone can find? And you helping to facilitate that rather than just giving someone a task and telling them to figure it out. There's nothing more irritating to someone coming into something, being really excited about it and looking for help and training and guidance and being told to figure it out. Like, why do you need to have Junior League then? Why do you need to have whatever nonprofit it is if it's just going to be trial by fire and you're feeling very alone? The whole point of being in this organization is so you have that connection with other people. Remember, we talked about why you joined and why you stay? That's why, because it's the connection with other people and not feeling like you're a silo and on your own place. The bottom left side, if you trust someone to be able to do it as far as their skills, you know that they are able to take care of whatever the project is or the assignment is, but you're not entirely convinced that they're super motivated. Like when we talked in the beginning about where you are on that chart with your enthusiasm, if you've asked your committee members up front, like, hey, how excited are you about this? And like, please be honest, because this is important. And they're like, I just said yes to this because I didn't get what I wanted, or I'm only doing this because I needed something that was going to be chill this year and I don't have a lot of time for it, then the way that you manage that lack of enthusiasm and motivation is to say, okay, I know you can do this. Can you do it by this date? And to manage it with a deadline. And if it's something that's a big project, it might need to be smaller deadlines and touch points along the way, right? Like you might not want to wait until the very end. But also knowing that if you've given someone a deadline, to recognize that many people, myself included, will not be more irritated by someone checking in before that deadline. And in not like a, hey, how's it going? But like, is it done yet? Like there's a big difference between those two responses. All right, so the last quadrant, if you don't trust your committee members' skills and you don't trust their motivation, then this is not the right fit. And we need to talk about redeployment and reassignment. And it's not firing a volunteer. I have a whole workshop on how to fire a volunteer. That's not what we're talking about. This just means trying to find something that is going to be a better fit for them. And it might totally stink for you as a committee chair because you still have the work to do. But if your goal as a member of the Junior League is to make sure that you are investing in this member, then you need to figure out where they are going to be happier. And I believe Summit has got a new, well, new to me, it's been a while since I've been an active member, a new situation where you're allowed to transfer from one committee to another if you're not sure everything is working out. And I think that's a brilliant way to handle this, to give people a little bit of time to try and say like, okay, yes, I can work with this, or nope, this isn't going to work out well. And not taking that personally. Again, not one of my best skill sets. I'm definitely the person that's going to have my feelings hurt a little bit. But when you're a committee chair and when you're in leadership, you need to set that aside and not share that with whoever this person is. You need to make sure that you are able to manage this and be professional about it. And then like totally find someone else to call and be like, oh my God, I feel like a total loser and they don't want to be my friend anymore. And like, it's okay to get that part out too, because we all are human and have those responses, but knowing when to share and when not to share is really important. All right. So we're going to fly through a couple of these so that I can make sure we get all the way to the end. We're going to be breaking out in about 6 or 7 minutes into breakout rooms to talk about some more specific things for everyone who's a Summit member, but anyone who is not a Summit member is going to hang with me in the main Zoom room, and I can go over some more of this in detail because I do feel like I've been totally speed talking as we go through. And I think I gave you most of this as we were going through the chart anyway. I do think it's really important to remember that this is all about empowerment, and giving your committee members the ability to make decisions is really important, because if people feel like they have to check with their committee chair on every single tiny detail, it's not going to make them feel like this is a really valuable experience. So just throw that out there too. All right, we're going to get a little bit into appreciation, the emotional paycheck. This is something that I think is really important. Plenty of people have managed someone in a professional sense. Managing someone in a volunteer sense is a very different skill set. And if you are the kind of person who loves to be thanked personally, you will probably find this appreciation giving to be a little bit more natural. If you tend to be the kind of person who is like, that was my job and I did it and it's cool, you might need to remember this a little bit more often and be a little bit more aware of it. All right, so apparently I had one slide on appreciating volunteers. Obviously it needs 20. Like, we need to just appreciate people way more than we actually do. And do it often, and do it personally to them, and then also to do it publicly. One of the things that I think is so fantastic that I had seen Junior League of Summit do, I've seen a lot of other nonprofit organizations do, is sort of a highlight of a volunteer, where they, they'll tell someone personally, like, you're amazing and we think you're awesome, and then they'll say publicly, we want to put some PR out on you. We want to make a little profile of you as a volunteer and talk about how amazing you are and all of the things you do for us, as well as the rest of the community, and you professionally, and you with all of the other stuff you do. And there's something that's really intrinsic about that, and making that a lever in one of your communications goals, I think is super important, and remembering that this is why people feel good about this. There's again, I feel like I'm cramming like 12 different workshops into one. I do a whole workshop about this, about what is it that people get out of volunteering. And there's brain science behind it. I don't know if any of you ever listened to the Happiness Lab podcast. It's one of my favorites. There's a whole podcast episode about how the brain develops and why people do things for other people. Like, why would someone stop on the highway and help you with a car issue when they don't know you? What is that brain science that's behind that? And this is an entire thing that I could talk on for a really long time, because again, like, super dork and the things that get me really excited. All right, so this is the last part of what we're going to be talking about with the nuts and bolts tip sheet. These are some of the things that I think are really important to set up front. And if you set them up front, that's great. If you had been working for a while and you're like, you know what, we didn't do this work, let's come back to it now, I think that also works. But showing your committee that this is important to you, I think it sets the tone, and having that management of expectations. And again, if you are a super type A dorky nerd, then setting a calendar for the year with all of your dates and meetings and conference calls and deadlines totally makes sense to you. If you're calmer and more of a like type B personality, maybe this makes sense, maybe it doesn't. But working with this so that people know, okay, the first Monday of every month is going to be our committee meeting, and if we don't need it, then we can cancel it and you have found time. But having that space carved out for it so that people know that it's available makes a lot of sense. One of the organizations that I sit on the board for has the most completely organized calendar of any organization I've ever worked with, and it makes me so happy because the board meetings are the first Monday of the month, the committee meetings are the third Monday of every month. So you have this every 2 week happening so that you know that the whole cadence of the way the organization works. And it's just lovely for a nerdy person like me that I know it, I block it out, and that's my commitment. And I think that, where we talk about this part at the bottom, like about standards for what's expected, like that can sound a little bit dry, but it's also creating an area of like, okay, where do you need more training? Do you want more training? Are you comfortable helping to train? Like, where are you in all of these things so that people can share where they are and where they want to go? And we'll talk more about that next week too, about knowing where people are and how much enthusiasm they have and how that determines about how much training they may or may not be willing to work on. So when I used to say face-to-face, I meant like in person. Like face-to-face over Zoom doesn't quite feel the same way. But like I said, it's so nice for me to see people and have actual faces and knowing that people are there and responding. So I think that that's really important too. And if your committee is like, all right, that's not how we want to operate, then that's okay also. But you need to have that communication and discussion. I'm a huge fan of minutes for every committee meeting. I know that that might seem like overkill to some people, but if you miss a meeting, you can find it. And then you can also have a section where you know who's supposed to be acting on what items so that you've got that follow-up. It's almost like a checklist so that it works for everybody. I also love what this professor of mine used to say, again, many years ago, when we would get like stressed out about workload and thesis papers and all kinds of stuff. And she would say, there's no heart in a cooler. And I think that that was like a really lovely way to keep things in perspective. And it made an impact on me. And I think being gracious about being human is a really important thing, especially if you're chairing the committee and knowing that you can be human too and that that's all right. Laura and I did a whole podcast about board norms and expectations, and I highly recommend it to talk about committee work too, because I think it really does apply in setting the tone and talking about what everybody would like to commit to. And you can find that, I believe, on the getonboardnj.org website. I believe the podcasts were just uploaded today. So hopefully you'll be able to find that. And there are some other resources that are available. There is a great webinar about delegation that's on the AJLI website. If you're interested in it, you can take a look and find it. And if you're super like, I can't find it, you can just ask me and I'll hunt around and share the link with all of you. I also think, you know, most of the leagues that I know that have been in the Small Leagues Big Impact group have been so glad to have the additional resources just to kick around and ask questions. You also get access to BoardSource, which is one of my all-time favorite dorky resources. And then I put the information for the different websites for the Junior Leagues of New Jersey as well. So we have like a main page that explains what the Junior Leagues of New Jersey are, as well as SPAC, which is the advocacy group. Get on Board NJ is all of the training materials that we are putting together as part of the state council. And then there is also a Junior Leagues of New Jersey Facebook group, which if you're not a member of yet, I highly recommend finding on Facebook so that you can join that, because it's another great information sharing tool to ask other people. And I think one of the things that's really fantastic about Junior League is how kind and sharing everybody is and asking questions, because we're all so committed to doing this work and doing it well, that we are happy to be a resource for everybody. So that is it. I am 2 minutes over, so I almost made it exactly at 8:45. If I talked any faster, I don't think anyone would have been able to understand me. So does anyone have any questions before we jump into breakout rooms? No questions so far. All right, then I am going to turn my myself back over to the rock star Amber, who is in charge of all things Zoom, because that is not my area of expertise. I'm just excited I was able to share my slides without crying. That was really exciting for me.
I've never been introed like that, so that was awesome. Thank you. So what we're going to do now is we're going to send everyone who is marked as Junior League of Summit or JLS in the participant list to a breakout room that's going to be facilitated by April and Tara. Everyone who is with a different league affiliate or Grace or our facilitator is actually going to stay in the main room. And we're going to go for how long, Tara? 10 minutes? 15 minutes?
10, 12, all good.
Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set a timer on my phone for 1 minute less than that. And you'll receive a message saying you're coming back in 60 seconds when you're 60 seconds out from your time. Eventually, it will suck you back in to the main room. So you don't need to do anything. What I'm going to do is hit open the rooms. Please accept the invitation, everyone in JLS, to go to the breakout room. And we'll get started from there. So we'll see you in 11, 12 minutes.
Everybody else can hang with me in the Zoom room, main Zoom room.
I'll be here with you. So people are leaving, so it is working.
I'm going to stay.
If you want to stay.
Well, I'm going to stay because
I'm not the boss of you.
Yeah, do you know what?
Yeah, I'm going to stay as well.
Yeah, with our Grace folks. Appreciate it, Liz.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right, it looks like everybody's gone. I'm going to set my timer now for like 11 minutes. And then
Amber,
Colleen, I
thank
didn't
you
know if
for
you had any
being in charge of
structured
that.
content to go over this time or if this was more just like a Q&A.
We're open for Q&A. Megan from Raleigh, thank you so much for joining. Liz, it's nice to see you again.
By the way.
Look at you. Is it like...
Those are my colors.
Okay, tell me I'm like so fascinated by everyone's Berkman. Tell me about, did you make this like out of Legos or is like this something that you got from Berkman?
No, when I started my job at Abbott, they made us do this in orientation. So I have like a perfect split with the yellow and blue, but the green is top and the red is.
Yeah. Oh, how fun is that? I love it. That's so cool.
I keep it on my desk.
That's so great. That's so cool.
So Colleen, I actually had a question for you, if folks don't mind. I had a question about, so I have to admit, I'm not a good delegator. On that Berkman, I'm like a red, yellow. I'm like a control, detail-oriented person. So I'm just sort of thinking about if you have any experience or advice to like how to map people on that 2x2 matrix you had and try to figure out, I want to identify people that I can let go and like let the baby bird, out of the nest. So just interested in your experience and sort of perspective in that particular area.
It's actually a great question. And it's one of the reasons that Laura and I have been working on this pilot program for Summit with Jihoon about skill competencies and using that as a model for how we operate. So I have been, again, like a big training dork. So AJLI has got this skills competency model that they hope that everybody will be able to either, some people come into the league already having tremendous amount of skills and have done a lot of nonprofit work or community work before. Other people are coming in and they have never done this before, but they want to. So trying to figure out where people are is a big part of it. This skills competency survey that we are working on is basically a tool to help people self-assess, right? And it's funny, I made my teenage son go on a dog walk with me today, and Laura happened to call me while we were on the walk, and I was talking, and then I hung up, and I was like, then I like continued the conversation with my 16-year-old son, who had like, it seems like very little interest, but then all of a sudden he was like, well, how do you know if someone can actually do that work? And I'm like, oh, the skills competency model. So that's why we've been kind of developing this. It will hopefully be ready in the next month-ish as something that you can utilize. But I think it's also really important to dive deep into like, what is it that your committee needs to do? Because I think that we have not necessarily been talking about skills competency model in terms of the actual job descriptions and the committee work. And those two things might not relate right now, and it might take a little while to get there. But if you can come up with your action plan for the year, right? Like you've got your strategic plan and how the league is looking at the year, and then you've got your action plan for your committee and what you're supposed to accomplish and what your tasks and goals and objectives are. And then figure out, okay, well, what do I need someone to know how to do in order to do this work? What are the skills that they need to have? And really identify those in an objective way, because then it's a little bit easier to be like, okay, well, can you run a Zoom breakout meeting and stick people in another room? And I would be like, I would be crying. I would be like, do not ask me to do that. I am going to lose my mind and I will run away screaming, right? Like that is not, I will not be a helpful volunteer. I do have some other skills that you might want to utilize in a better way. So I think figuring out like, what is the job that we need people to do and being super clear with, okay, here's what we need to accomplish. And then you can talk in a group. I personally love doing one-on-one with people. Like if you've got 5 or 6 people in your committee, if you can say like, listen, I'd love to have like an interview kind of conversation where we talk about like everything going on in your life. So I get a sense of who you are, what else is happening to you. And then here are the things that we're going to be doing. Does any of this interest you? Do you feel really drawn to particular parts of what we're going to be trying to work on? Do you feel like, oh, I could do that easily? Or are you feeling like there are some of those things that I could do because those are skills that I have in my regular day job, but I don't want to do them. I would like to learn something else. I would like to have something else that I can develop in my skill set that I'm going to be able to apply to this experience. And, you know, if you can spend a half hour, 40 minutes with someone to go over all of that from the outset, first of all, it's going to make them feel like you actually care, right? Like, oh, this person cares about me and where I am. And it's also listening to them as a human. And if then you go back and be like, okay, listen, Junior League of Summit, you gave me 5 people on my committee. Here are the 10 things that you asked us to accomplish this year. And I have 0 people who have any of the skills that are necessary. Well, then you're having a more strategic conversation. Then you can be like, we're not going to be able to produce this. You've asked us to do the wrong things. You've given me different people other than the skills that are here. So you need to readjust your expectations. You need to not ask me to make these individuals develop this and make this happen right now. So I think that's kind of does that make sense the way I explained it that way?
Yeah, thank you.
What else?
I guess
I love Q&A.
for me, we are starting Grace, the new board, and I've never actually started a board. I've always joined a board. So I think we don't know what we don't know.
Yes.
So,
yes. You are in a super fun place right now, Liz. It's going to be amazing for you.
super fun and nerve-wracking.
So tell me how many people you know you have on your board and how many more you think are going to be adding in. Like what's your
I think
composition?
we have 7 or 8 right now. It's funny,
Okay.
I should know that off board. And Vanessa is actually with us. She's part of our Grace. I think we're still developing like what needs we have. Like we definitely need a marketing person and trying to figure out where the gaps are. So that's where we are right now.
So I think part of the challenge for you as you are a growing brand new organization is that you are most likely going to be operating with dual hats. And Laura and I did a workshop last year at Get On Board called Board Roles and Responsibilities, which is super boring and super dry, but you want to watch it anyway because it's really important and we're super fun to watch. We took the most boring material ever and made it super fun. Okay. So that video, I believe, is also being uploaded to getonboardnj.org. And it talks a lot about, okay, what are the legal obligations and duties that I have as a board member? Because in the state of New Jersey, there's actual law about what you have to do, which is why I was so glad that Laura did this with me, because she's like a real life attorney and she knows this stuff. And I might be married to an attorney, but I don't always listen to things that he is saying. And he doesn't do nonprofit stuff anyway. But it also talks about the different spheres of what you have to do as far as like strategic planning and governance work versus management and committee work. And when you're a brand new organization, you probably wind up doing a lot of both. And especially the committee work, like if you're talking about like we need someone on the board for marketing, that's kind of management and committee work. So making sure that you've got time for both of those things, I think is going to be one of your challenges to get to. So, and I would be so happy to work with you guys and talking about all of that stuff. I had mentioned to Tara and Erica that I would love to help you all as you launch, because I love what Grace does. You guys are amazing and awesome, and it's something near and dear to my heart. My daughter is 14. She's just finishing her silver award for Girl Scouts, and she did it all about food insecurity and the intersection with food allergies. So she's like, this has been like a big topic for our family personally too. So
Love it. Love it. And Vanessa's on our board too, and she's awesome.
I've been listening. I just have had technical problems with another computer about video. And I'm looking very blue, I noticed. This is really interesting.
No, I'm telling you, the tech, it's like my heart stops.
But thank you for inviting us. It's so incredibly helpful. I shouldn't confess I wish I had this before joining another board, but we won't talk about that.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Yeah. Learning by fire is always so exciting.
Yes, and thank you for your support. So we're definitely going to be calling upon you.
I'm happy to help however I can. There's a lot of great resources that we've been trying to put together and make like an online library of curriculum for, I think board roles and responsibilities is like must-watch TV for anyone who's joining a board. Laura and I, as much as we did not love making the podcast, there is some good info in there if you're looking for some of those like day-to-day things of how to kick off your year. Board norms.
Actually, what can you can you repeat the title again?
Yes. So I believe everything is on the website Get On Board NJ.
No, the podcast title?
It's a great question. Do we have a title? I wish I knew that. I mean, if you go to the website,
I think we're calling it Get On Board NJ, the podcast, because we're that creative.
Obviously, we need a little marketing love also.
You got it.
Thank you, Laura.
Wonderful. Thank you, guys.
Super. Any other questions? I think we've got what do we have, Amber, before people come back in?
I just gave them the 60-second warning.
Perfect.
So people will start coming back. Technically, we have 13 seconds.
Amazing.
I did set a timer. So people will start coming back on their own, or they'll be sucked back in 40 seconds. Give them a little extra time.
And I did just check our Get On Board website. If you scroll down, there are links to each of the podcast episodes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Again,
and I believe we will be placing this recording on there as well.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Laura.
So Megan, we're looking forward to some more folks from JL Raleigh joining next week. We have part 2.
I don't know anyone in Raleigh.
Just send them an email.
So I
send them an email with the link.
Yeah, I just moved here from Morristown. So I was with Junior League of Morristown, which is how I knew about you guys when I went to Get On Board last year.
Oh, awesome.
So I saw you present last year, so I decided to click and join. Why not?
Oh, that's fun. Well, what a crazy time for you to be moving to a new place. It's got to be a lot going on.
It's a weird time to come to a new place, for sure, when you don't know anyone.
And you can't go out and meet anyone new and see them. Yeah.
All right, welcome back, everyone. I know if you didn't come back on your own, you kind of got sucked back in. So I'll turn it over to Colleen and Tara as we start to wrap up the session.
Yeah, I don't think I have much to add. If there's anyone that has any questions, I'm happy to answer anything that you might have burning questions about.
One question that did come up in our breakout room that I wanted to share with those who were not in the JLS breakout room is there will be a mail step that will have some of the resources from this chat in it. So don't worry if you didn't take perfect notes. We won't expect that of you. We'll help you out with that.
Yes, I will give you guys a PDF presentation handout, something or other from the slides. I just was not able to do that from Google Slides because, again, I'm not quite that bright. I have to figure out how to make that transfer happen. I know how to do it in PowerPoint, but apparently nobody uses PowerPoint anymore. That's like old school. So that just dates me.
Is it? Oh my God. I had no idea. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Someone tell the consultants.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Apparently everyone's telling me nobody does PowerPoint, everybody does slides. I'm like, okay, I didn't even know there was a difference. I thought that was the same thing. So, but once I figure out how to make that happen, I'll make sure you guys have got a link for that too.
Guys, any other questions before we wrap up? I mean, it's 9:03. We could close out of the meeting early, but questions, for sure, we want to make sure that we take them.
I have a question, and I came in late, so I apologize if this was covered, but with, you know, with where things are right now, if we're going into the fall in a similar situation, quarantine-wise, like, should we even ask our committee members if they want to meet in person, or should we just assume to do it, you know, Zoom?
I think you should figure out, actually, Amber's going to ask a question about this as we close out, but I think you should try to understand what makes your committee folks comfortable. I mean, if there's obviously appropriate social distancing and the right precautions are taken, but certainly I think that if we can make Zoom opportunities available, because not everybody may want to join live.
Yeah.
I think it's where the comfort of the committees are, et cetera. I know Jen is also looking into getting more Zoom accounts for us. April has also taught me the beauty of Google Hangout, which I was terrified about, but I think we have lots of options that we can do if we can't meet live, but I know some people are craving it and some people are wanting to stay really far away from it.
I found that Google Hangout is good for some things, but I was rudely, I rudely learned that when you try to play videos, because I had made these beautiful videos for the end of school for my kids' classes, and their parties, their Google Hangout parties, none of the videos don't play. Like, it's pixelated and everything. So if you're planning a meeting and you have videos, do not use them.
That makes me very sad for you that you spent that time and you couldn't share the video. Again, like my tech heartache, like that just kills me.
I forwarded it to them.
That's nice of you. I will just throw out there that a lot of nonprofit organizations, or at least the ones that I'm familiar with, are coming up with some set policies as a board about when and how and who can meet in person. So I don't know if the board is having that conversation or not. If you're leaving it up to committees to make choices, I highly recommend that you have those conversations in private with people one-on-one rather than within a group, because anyone who is not comfortable meeting in person is probably not going to be comfortable saying so in a group setting, because it's a very individualized choice. But most of the work that I've been doing with the boards I sit on right now, we have very specific guidelines for phase 1 and phase 2 about whether or not the organization allows groups to meet in person. Phase 1, the answer is no. Phase 2, there's with approval only, and then phase 3 is when they would allow groups to start meeting in person. So that way you're coming up with policy according to the state guidelines. So that's just something for the board to consider, rather than making people feel uncomfortable that it's more of a choice. It's nice. I think people like to have guidelines and know that there's policy behind it. Anything else? It's not an easy time to be leading people when you have to do everything virtually. It can be a real challenge to have that connection that you're looking for with people. And that connection is part of what makes the work of the league so rewarding. So to try and find creative ways to have that, I think is really good as well.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, well, as we wrap up, thank you very much, Colleen, for spending your evening with us. We're really looking forward to next week. And as a reminder, this isn't just for committee chairs, so if you know folks on your committee or other members within the league that could benefit from this information, please invite them to sign up for next week and join us again on Tuesday, where we'll cover a different set of topics that will help you be the biggest and best chair that you possibly can.